mit der Akzeptanz der 4 Grundfreiheiten und dazu gehört auch die Freizügigkeit der Personen. Brexit means Brexit.
Hello and welcome to another Brexitometer brought to you by the Martens Center. I'm Angelos and I'm joining you from King's College London, and together we will examine again all the latest developments regarding Brexit. Before we get to your questions, of course, the first thing we have to talk about is the result of last Thursday's elections here in the UK. A result that nobody expected and everybody's still trying to come to grips with here in London. Most of you will have heard by now that the results produced an hung parliament, which means that there is no majority for a single party in the British Parliament. This means that the Conservative Party of Theresa May is now trying to create some kind of coalition moving forward. What does this result mean for Brexit? I think there are three things that we have to keep in mind as we try to understand the importance of this result for Brexit. Point number one, this was not a pro-European result. Pro-European parties such as the Liberal Democrats or the Scottish National Party did relatively okay, but did not do as well for us to be able to say that it was a big swing of public opinion towards Europe. One of the reasons that Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party did very well was precisely the fact that he managed to switch the discussion away from Brexit and to discuss issues concerning austerity and social justice. Point number two. Even if this result was not very pro-European, it definitely was not the big endorsement of hard Brexit that Theresa May was hoping for. Theresa May ran on the slogan "No deal is better than a bad deal." The fact that she could not produce a majority in Parliament around "no deal is a bad deal" creates some kind of hope that perhaps the British political system can move towards a position where they will understand that a deal is necessary for the UK moving forward. Point number three, things are really complicated right now. Of course, there is no big endorsement for the hard Brexit of Theresa May, but it's very difficult to say what this election actually endorsed. What do the British people want? Because just like there is no clear mandate towards a hard Brexit, such as Theresa May was putting on the table, it's very difficult to say whether there was a clear endorsement of a soft Brexit or anything else. Basically, what we have right now is a country that is really confused and is really looking inwards, trying to understand what it is that it wants from its relationship with Europe. We're leaving, but we don't really know why, and we don't really know when, and we don't really know how. This is the sentiment here in the UK following the election. Our first question comes from Paula Campbell, who is asking something very sensible and something not a lot of us are actually thinking about. How much time does the UK actually have to produce an agreement before it has to leave? Now, Paula, this is a very interesting question, and I think the answer is that there's not a lot of time. Remember, Theresa May triggered Article 50 at the end of March. Article 50 leaves 2 years, 24 months for a country to negotiate its exit from the EU. It's been already 3 months since Theresa May triggered Article 50. This means that 1/8 of the time that required for negotiations has already gone. And if we figure in the fact that we still have the summer months ahead of us, and then perhaps the elections in Germany that may create again a small period of transition, 6 months may have passed. This means that a quarter of the time required for the UK to negotiate its exit will have passed and nothing will have happened. And then we also have to figure in the fact that perhaps we might need 6, 4, 5 months towards the end of the process for ratification. Looking at it right now, I think it's very sensible to calculate that the UK will not have more than a full year of negotiating time in order to agree the terms of its separation from the EU. Is this enough? I really don't think so. Our second question comes from Michael Ward, who is asking How can the EU and the UK ensure that there will be no more sectarian tensions in Northern Ireland following Brexit and no return of the hard border? Now, Michael, this is a very, very pertinent question, no least because the inconclusive election result of last Thursday has put at the epicenter of our attention a party very few people had actually heard of before, the Democratic Unionist Party in Northern Ireland, the DUP. Theresa May is trying to create a coalition with the DUP. The terms of this coalition are still being negotiated, but of course the point is that having the DUP in government creates a completely different dynamic for Northern Irish politics as well. The fear here is that including the DUP in government will regenerate problems concerning the sectarian divide in Northern Ireland. The DUP is a party that favors soft Brexit. It does not want a soft border between the UK and Ireland. And this is good. And having the DUP on board means that perhaps the Conservatives will have to move towards a softer stance on Brexit. But on the other hand, the DUP is a very hardcore party when it comes to the interests of the unionist majority in Northern Ireland. This means that perhaps the British government will not be able to present itself as an honest broker of any problems that may appear in Northern Irish politics. So it is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you bring in a party that is more soft on Brexit, but on the other hand, you bring in a party that is much more harder concerning issues of coexistence of the two communities in Northern Ireland. What the British government should do is to be very, very careful in approaching the DUP and should try to link the process of bringing the DUP closer to government in Westminster with an honest brokerage of the differences between the different Northern Irish parties, because remember, following the last Northern Irish elections, there is also no government formed still in Belfast. It will be very, very difficult for Theresa May to both rely on the DUP for support in Westminster and, on the other hand, try to help Northern Irish parties create a new coalition in Belfast. Our third and final question for this Brexitometer comes from Kyle Parks, who shifts our attention back towards Europe. And Kyle is asking, what are the positions of other European EU member states on Brexit, and are there any differences between them beyond just France and Germany, the countries we mostly hear about? Kyle, this is a very, very interesting question, and it is important to keep in mind the other EU member states, not least because probably at the end of the process, the agreement between the EU and the UK will have to be ratified in some way by other EU member states. I think there are not many differences of position between the different EU member states. Most EU member states prefer the Brexit process to be as fast and as orderly and as non-dramatic as possible. I think the key divide is between EU member states that have a general preference towards an orderly Brexit on the one hand, and EU member states that have a specific item on the agenda that they want to see settled. You have Ireland, which is worried about the border between Ireland and Northern Ireland. You have Spain and Gibraltar. You have Cyprus and the question of the sovereign basis on the island of Cyprus that the Great Britain has there. And of course you have countries in Eastern Europe such as Poland that are worried about the rights of many of their nationals living in the UK. The main interesting point here, of course, is that in the beginning of the process, many people feared that the UK would be capable of exploiting differences between EU member states, the traditional fear of British diplomacy always taking advantage of differences and disagreements between Europeans. I think the important thing to remember as we think about the overall landscape of the EU is that it is the UK right now that is in so much shambles, and it's actually the divisions inside the UK that are setting the tone of this negotiation instead of the divisions inside the EU. The EU has shown to be very, very adept at concealing or negotiating any divisions among EU member states towards Brexit. I think moving forward we will be talking much more about the mess that Brexit is creating inside the UK rather than any divisions inside the EU. So this was Brexitometer number 6, our post-election Brexitometer. Don't forget that you can always keep sending me your questions on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram using the hashtag Brexitometer. It's going to be very interesting times ahead. Will Theresa May stay in government? Will the Tories replace her with a new Prime Minister? Is there going to be a new election in the fall? what is going to be the role of Northern Ireland and Scotland moving forward? Is the economic situation going to take center stage as the UK realizes that its economy is slowing down? Lots of questions to talk about moving forward. Don't forget, keep sending me your questions and I'll be here to answer them.
Mit der Akzeptanz der vier Grundfreiheiten und dazu gehört auch die Freizügigkeit der Personen. Brexit means Brexit.